In a recent video that we did, we talked about how local businesses are always going to have a big advantage over expat businesses because they just have a lot more knowledge, resources, and so forth, and it makes it very challenging to try to compete. Now, one of our regular viewers, Christopher House, left this comment, and I think it's worth commenting on. I think he's, just being like, haha, here's a way that it would work. Not trying to be super serious about it. Maybe he is, but I think the idea gets into people's brains, and it's worth discussing, so I want to jump into this. He says, if a rich man married a beautiful Nicaraguan woman, I'm sure he could have a successful business in the right location and price range in Nicaragua if his wife was the manager of the company. So first of all, let's just say, if you are coming into Nicaragua and investing as a business, you always could be successful, right? We're not saying that it's impossible. We're not saying that no one has done it. The biggest thing is that almost everyone who's done it and been successful did it when times were more affluent, when there was more going on, and they paid their dues earlier on. And people who are trying to do it today are having much less success, partially because there are successful expats still here, still holding on, who, for example, let's just say a restaurant, but this could be a factory or whatever, they came in and did all the investment long ago when prices were even lower, when just the market internationally was lower, and their mortgages or their investment amounts were smaller. They paid everything off when times were good, and they probably were profitable when there was a load of expansion, right? Especially in the years between like 2013 and 2018, there was a period of just unbelievable economic growth, government investing like crazy, foreigners investing like crazy. This is when a lot of the scams came up because so much money was flowing through the country that people were like, we can just make money hand over fist, like any bubble, right? Someone comes in and is like, it's like the AI bubble now. You can go put AI on anything. 90% of the things that say, ooh, AI enabled are just things they used to have, and they slap the word AI on them. No one knows what AI actually is. The whole thing's a scam. Not that there aren't valuable products, but it's not really AI being used. All of it is marketing terms, not real terms, kind of like 5G in the US. There isn't any 5G in the US, but we call it that because they made a law that they could lie about it because American consumers can't handle the truth. So this is a common thing. Everyone wants something to say AI. We could just slap right now. We could run out into Nicaragua and create a housing development, call it the AI housing development, and someone is going to invest in it just because it has AI in the name. I don't know how AI applies to a housing development. Maybe they think the plumbing is designed by robots. I have no idea what they think, but that kind of stuff would actually work. People would actually invest because of that. So during this time, about 2013 to about 2018, people were investing because Nicaragua was on the name, which is great for the country in a way, but people were not investing smartly, and so tons of them overpaid for things. Often people bought things that didn't really exist. In some cases, the same person or the same product was sold to 10 different people who didn't realize it until it was the owner or the original seller had long after skipped out of the country, and no one knew who was really the owner, and then often no one got anything, right? The amount of money that was scammed or stolen through the system was incredible because it all blew up so quickly. There wasn't time to put guards in place, and people were so anxious to invest with that they just don't think clearly. And some of this still goes on today, but it's minor compared to what it used to be. But a lot of these businesses got in back then who were savvy. They paid reasonable prices, got real businesses, were able to use this massive influx of money and people during those years to create profit. They then take that money and they have a nest egg. They have paid off everything. They learned how to do things when it was easy to do so. And now all they have to do is hold on and run very leanly and not lose all of their financial resources that they gained when times were good, and hope that times will get better again. And they certainly are. We're the fastest growing economy in the region and have been for a while. We're safe. The infrastructure is good. Everything is great here. So there's a really good opportunity to just hold out, and things just keep getting better. The middle class is growing and growing. And so there's more and more opportunities for existing businesses to do well, but it's still a very difficult market. So when you see people who are successful, almost always they've been successful and managed to remain in place, sometimes able to be successful. But if you were to come in and replicate what they did, you probably wouldn't be successful because you would pay more for the starting point. You would not have the fat years to gain profits, to ride out the lean years and so forth. And so it's much more difficult today. So just because something is a pattern that worked in the past doesn't suggest that it can be a pattern to work in the future. It is a place to start from. You want to learn from patterns that have worked in the past, but you also want to be aware why they worked and why they may not apply today and why they might apply again in the future at some point. How do you identify when that time has come? Now, there's a couple things here. If you are rich, presumably either you're rich because you just have a lot of family money and you don't care about things and you just want to throw it into something, or you got there because you're smart and you know how to run a business. If you're the latter, then the question will obviously come up of, yes, you probably could come to Nicaragua and make money, but why would you? And not to say that you wouldn't want to come to Nicaragua and invest. I do, so I totally understand why others would want to do so. But the thing that drives someone who is already successful in business is not going to logically translate into a new country. The reason that I do it here is because I want to make a difference in the country, not that I want to be wildly successful here. Of course, I'd prefer to be wildly successful and help the country. Great. But that's not my end goal. My end goal, that is a bonus. My end goal is to be beneficial to the country because I want to make a positive difference. And I'm able to do that without being wildly successful financially. The reason that that makes sense is because I picked Nicaragua to move to. This is the country I want to live in. I want to make a positive difference in the place that is my adoptive home. I appreciate what Nicaragua does for me. I hope that it appreciates what I do for it. It's a symbiotic relationship. And so that is a natural flow of things. But if I was simply a wealthy person and wanted to make lots of money, I wouldn't go, hey, here's a country I don't know very well. I'm going to move there, seek out a beautiful woman to fall in love with. That part could make sense. And then marry her, hope that her family has resources, knowledge, and is skilled in business, and that she will be a good manager, and that I can then use her as a guide to help me be a good investor in the country. That's not a smart process for a lot of reasons. One, if you have money to invest, you don't want to wait the years and years that it takes to do that process and do it well. Two, doing anything like that, whether intentional or accidental, for example, maybe you visited Nicaragua on vacation, fell in love, never wanted to leave, fell in love with the country, eventually met a beautiful woman, fell in love, didn't want to leave, and then you have to trust that her motives and her family's motives and their family pressures and all that are good, because there is a reasonable possibility that it will not be, right? There is always this risk in anywhere, but especially in coming into a new market. And Nicaragua is known for this, that things like marriage scams are very big. And there are a lot of families that pressure girls into bleeding out of a relationship, whatever they can. And so while obviously the majority of people aren't going to do that, the percentage that might is quite high, and it poses a risk. Someone who is quite wealthy and coming into a market where they're already quite wealthy, they're going to be super wary of those situations. And while, yes, under perfect circumstances, you're right, if you have financial resources and you just happen to be in Nicaragua and you just happen to want to stay and you just happen to fall in love with someone who just happens to be a good manager, and you put all this stuff together, yes, they could be a good life partner who's also a good business partner. But the chances of that are so unlikely that you're already into that winning the lottery kind of category. The reality is that, yes, you could marry into a family that does have good intentions and good knowledge of things and can provide you some resources. Yes, the chances that also your wife, who is not already managing a successful business, is going to be able to manage yours approaches zero. It's just reality, right? The overlap of all those skills, and to not be leveraging them, but be ready to leverage them for you, not realistically going to happen. Now, if you have so much money that you're able to go find someone who's running a wildly successful company and you're able to poach them, you don't need to marry them, just poach them anyway, right? There's just a combination of things here that don't really come together. If you're really looking for a contrived scenario, yes, it's true. If you have a really good marriage and they have these skills and the family has these connections and you already had money and somehow all those things came together and you want to make money, not just live, but you make your money in Nicaragua, you can probably find a way to make it possible. But will that, after all that, outperform investing in the market that you came from is the question. And generally the answer is going to be no. Could it be yes? Yes, it can be. But it's extremely unlikely. If you have those resources already, before you move to Nicaragua, you could be investing them in whatever country it is you're coming from and almost certainly have a better chance because you're not going to take all the chances. You would have to avoid that investment, move to Nicaragua, hope you met that beautiful woman, hope that you did all these things, right? So where are you going to find a rich, savvy investor who is willing to give up their investments on a very outlying possibility that someday, years in the future, they will establish a relationship with someone who happens to be in this incredibly unlikely scenario, right? It's too many things, if you draw the Venn diagram of where they overlap, they don't overlap. That's the reality, right? If you were really to try to do this on a mathematical scale with a country as small as Nicaragua, it is possible that the potential number of people who would fall into this category to potentially marry and might be 1 to 5 women in the country, right? It's just that unlikely that this very specific set of circumstances would be able to come up that would apply to you. Now, if you're just looking for someone wonderful to marry, easy, right? So many great people in this country. That's not a problem. Just want to find someone who's going to be a good manager of the type of business you run. Hard, but not impossible. Definitely you can find a lot of hardworking, honest people in this country, right? And with the specific knowledge and skills that you need. Yes, there's lots of them. You'll probably be able to find one. Might take a little bit of time, but you can do it, right? Can you find an investment that could work with the right management? Yes, absolutely. It's not a ton of them, but they're out there and they definitely exist. It's a small market, so you can only expect there to be so many. But when you start trying to put all these things together into a very contrived scenario, it starts to become something doesn't really add up, and that's where it gets difficult. That whole thing where you know, if you're in this position to make this happen, you would never allow this to happen. You would want to have a just as good or better investment somewhere else happening ahead of time to fund your life so that you're free to go marry the person you want, and then not have to marry depending on them to bring these extra skills to the table. Now, if you're already married and then become wealthy after the fact, right? You inherit millions of dollars, right? And you don't know what to do, but your wife's family does. Okay. But has that ever happened? Again, such a small market, statistically, it's probably never occurred. So this, yes, in theory, contrived scenario could happen. In practice, has never, will never happen. Right? Easily in all history, it won't come up because it's just so unlikely. What you would really have to have is someone who has investments that are successful. That's what makes them rich, right? They're good at investing. They've been investing. And to have a potential in Nicaragua, that when they put it all together, they say, this will outperform my existing investments. And then to pull their money out of their existing investments, which could be things they own or just invest, like could mean a lot of things, and move that money into Nicaraguan investments and take on that new risk, right? That unknown is so scary. Is from a financial perspective. I don't mean you'd be scared to do it. I mean that from a financial risk perspective, which we use the term scary to refer to, is so extreme that even if you're like, oh my gosh, my money's been making 12% returns, but I think this could make a 15% return. And you're like, but you think it can. There's so many things to go wrong where I lose everything, right? Why would you be willing to give up a certain affluence for a risk of hopefully just a little bit more affluence, right? There's with a lot of work probably involved. It doesn't really make sense. And so unless you get people like me who are going to be very involved in doing it for different reasons, or you get people who are doing it because they're doing their own research, like there's just a certain number of combinations that aren't going to happen. Because, if you're dealing with reckless people who aren't wealthy, yeah, all kinds of things happen, right? All kinds of bad decision making can happen. But if you have a logical, good businessman or woman, and they're looking at coming down and using a spouse, not necessarily a woman, could be, whatever combination of things you want to have, this person is moving down. And they're going to a market that they don't know yet. And they have to put in years to get to know that market and years to get to know the people. That's all time that they're not able to actively do that thing, whatever that thing is, right? Whether it's running a factory or running a restaurant or having an office building or you name whatever it is, right? Engineering team. Right. Now, I have people who work here in Nicaragua in a lot of different roles, but it happened organically over a long period of time because we wanted to live here. If we didn't want to live here, if we hadn't lived here, those things would not have come together. We couldn't have put together the logic to invest in Nicaragua. As great as we could hypothesize it would have been, it would have taken so long of our investment time, so much effort to specifically figure out, and the risk that we were wrong. What if Nicaragua wasn't a place that made sense for us to invest? What if, okay, we could get a factory, we could get workers. We got the logistics wrong. There's no shipping to the country we need to ship to. We have to ship through a third party, and that's going to cost an extra 10%. And oh my gosh, that was our margin. We're a valueless factory. We lost our shirts on this venture because we didn't know enough pieces. That's not something that you would take the risk on its own. It just doesn't work. You have to have something that drives you to do that research and figure out those pieces. And for us, it's because we wanted to live here and we had the time, and that time from living gave us those resources. All the time that we lived here, we were in the US investing. So we were making our money elsewhere. And that gave us the time from our personal lives to eventually be able to invest here and have a different experience. It has to play out in that order. It's the only way that it really is going to make sense. It's just not going to happen some other way. So yeah, I get the sentiment, and I know it's not meant to be a super serious thing, but for people who are thinking in this way, it is important to understand that these set of circumstances would be a case, but they just aren't going to happen. And so you want to think about your own scenarios. Everyone's looking for, there must be a way to make money. Everyone keeps saying it, but when you really come down, and yes, there are ways to make small amounts of money. There are situations that are profitable, but when you break it down, is it replicable? Could it be done today, or did it only work because it was in the past? Was it luck of the draw? Are they truly profitable, or are they talking about their salaries and combining the two to make it sound much better than it actually is? There's a lot of things that come up on a recurring basis, and you want to be wary of how you're viewing it, because you may not be looking at a thing that's profitable, and they may be making it look relatively profitable because you're missing a bunch of the picture. Anyway, I want you to just be cautious about how you approach investing in a new country. Certainly come down to Nicaragua and invest, but do so with your eyes wide open, and make sure you understand the business principles of what you're doing, and make sure that your end goals can be met by the actions that you're taking. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. As always, get in the show notes, check everything out, sponsor us by buying me a coffee, help out my producer Marcela by hitting up her GoFundMe. Information on there. Of course, anything you need to contact me is in the show notes. If you just look in the show notes, everything's there. Get in the comments, say hello, ask a question, share on social media. I will see all of you tomorrow.